Sammy Jacobs Senior Exhibition. You'll have 15 to 20 minutes to present. We'll give you a little cue when it's 15 minutes. When she's done presenting, if anybody has any questions, we encourage you to ask questions. See if you can catch her on. Just kidding. Any questions you might have during her presentation, I'm sure you'd love to answer. And then afterwards, we'll meet and confer and let you know how you did. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
That's good.
Okay.
Can I start like whenever?
Yes.
Is that fine? All right.
Absolutely.
So I'm Samantha Jacobs, and this is my senior exhibition. I actually started thinking about this project last year when my older sister was going through the process. As she was thinking of possible project ideas, I started thinking a lot about what I might be interested in doing. And it's an independent project, so I knew I wanted it to be something that motivated me and that I was really interested in. So makeup artistry and clothing design were two things I kind of bounced around. The fashion and beauty industry has always been really interesting to me. So I thought those two might be cool. And then as she got farther into the process, I realized that Senior X is kind of an opportunity to research something you might not be able to research again, and that I should probably do something that I won't continue to research in my free time. So I decided on jewelry making. I'd always kind of had an interest in jewelry, but I hadn't really studied it before. And for me, it's not that far to like the fashion realm. It's an accessory, and that's a large part of fashion, just something I hadn't focused on. And I also had no idea how to create pieces. You know, I'd see ones in stores or during like fashion shows I was watching, and I had no idea how to create them. So I kind of wanted to learn. And then I also knew Julie Havener, who ended up being my mentor. So I'll talk about her a bit later. But I approached her about the idea, I think, at the end of the summer last year, and she was psyched about it, so then I got really psyched about it as well. Once I confirmed with her that she would be my mentor, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I got really into it. So I knew that I needed to prove new learning, and I didn't want it to be in like the generic, oh, I learned how to make new jewelry, and I learned how to make jewelry, and that's my new learning type of way. So my essential question changed several times. I want to say like 4 to 5 times, because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to prove. And eventually I decided on this, which is what will I discover about myself through learning a new and challenging skill like jewelry making. And I started on my journey. So prior knowledge, pretty minimal. I'd made bracelets as a child out of like that stretchy string and cheap beads, and normally it broke within like several days, and I'd just keep remaking them. I'd also been shopping for jewelry both at my mentor's workplace and other local jewelers around the island. And then background knowledge, this is once I decided that I wanted to create pieces of jewelry. I got really into it. I followed probably like, I want to say 10 different Instagram accounts of different jewelry artists, and I started to get to know their styles and different things that they like to do. I also got really into gemstones. I watched a gemstone documentary called Treasures of the Earth, which talked a lot about like the chemical makeup of them and where they're mined, where they're found, different cuts and colors, which was really interesting because I knew like your basic like diamonds and sapphires and stuff like that. But this allowed me to know a whole lot more and be able to identify a lot more gemstones. Inspiration, I wasn't joking when I said I followed a lot of different Instagram accounts. These are like several different artists. I think there's 8 in there that I was really inspired by. And so every time I saw a piece that I really loved, either in person or on Instagram, I would screenshot it and put it in an album so that I would have all those pieces that inspired me. And something that I didn't realize about jewelry before I started this is that each jeweler has their own specific style, and so sometimes like they'll do something a little different, but normally they'll work with like the same metals and same gemstones, and you can really learn to identify their pieces, which I think is pretty cool. So this is my mentor, Julie Havener. She's a woman of many jobs. She's not only a metalsmith, but she's a mom, a wife, and a midwife. She studied at Evergreen State College, pre-med, in order to become a midwife, which is like her main gig. But when she came back to the island, one of her clients was Lisa Hall, who owns a studio on the island. And so they were talking one day, and Julie asked if she like might be hiring and if Julie could learn how to make pieces of jewelry from her, and it ended up working out. So 12 years ago, they started making pieces together, and now Julie manages Lisa Hall Studio, and she also has her own midwifery practice. I picked her because I really love her style and because we have a personal relationship and I thought we'd get along well. So this is Lisa Hall Studio, where I did all of my work. There's the outside, one of the pictures, and then the inside kind of setup. They do sell more things than just jewelry. You know, there's skincare, different little trinkets and stuff like that. And then the first meeting, Julie and I didn't actually create any pieces of jewelry. We did a lot of talking. We didn't have a lot of time, so it was not a good time to like start making pieces. But we talked about the direction of my project. I think we bounced around several like essential questions, things we might be interested in. I showed her the inspiration photos, which I showed you guys. I had a lot more of them, and they were more kind of like pinpointed towards things I might be able to make with her. And then our longest topic of discussion was the meaning of jewelry to me, which was really interesting because I'd thought about it before, but I hadn't really like voiced it to that many people, I guess. And she wanted to know like why jewelry and why I was interested in this project. And I'm a pretty sentimental person, so I kind of put that on all of my life, I guess. So most of my jewelry collection is pieces that have been like given to me from important people for like important times. So when I put on a piece or I look at a piece, I'm reminded of those people in my times. And it was interesting to talk with Julie about that because obviously she has a range of clientele that are purchasing for all different reasons. And so it was cool for her to hear my reason because I've bought pieces of jewelry from her. I also received the book A Complete Metalsmith, which is a very, very in-depth guide on probably for like someone that wants to open up their own jewelry shop. So I didn't read it front to back because not every section was like applicable to what I'd be doing. But I did read the tools section, the gemstone section. I read about different settings and then also different like metals and stuff like that and soldering. So this is the setup inside. I kind of bounce between the two stations. I'll get into the tools a little bit later, but that's the bench and then the solder station where you're doing like the melting of and joining of metals. So this is the process. Julie creates bezel pieces, which is the silver part that encases your gemstone, and so that's what I learned how to do because that was easiest for me to learn versus like her teaching me a brand new thing that she didn't really know. And I also love the look of bezel jewelry, so it ended up working out. This is like a bit of the process, like kind of step by step, and then I'll talk about tools. There is a lot of tools for jewelry making, which I wasn't expecting. And so for making bezels, you start out with bezel wire and you wrap that around your gemstone, and then using flush cutters, you'll cut it to the length that you want, and then chain nose pliers you use to form the two ends together. And then you have to solder your piece together. So you use flux, which is kind of like glue for your solder, and you pick up the hard solder wire and solder the two ends that you're trying to join using a torch. And so then you have like the outside of your bezel, and now it's time to make the bottom. And you use the silver sheet to do that and a pair of scissors to cut it. And then it's a similar process, but this time you use medium solder wire, which is a bit easier to melt. And then after that, you've made your entire bezel, and you use grinding and sanding to kind of perfect the outside of it. And then you attach either like a jump ring if you're trying to make a pendant, or posts if you're trying to make earrings, using easy solder, which has it's even easier to melt. And then once you've attached everything you want to attach, then you put the gemstone in, and then you file and use a bezel rocker to encase it. So I know that was a lot, so I actually have a video of me creating a piece of jewelry. This was a bit farther into like my meetings with Julie, so I kind of knew what I was doing and I wasn't really asking her that many questions. I'm creating a ring here, so this is kind of like the soldering process of soldering it together, and then here I'm creating the bottom of the bezel. It's definitely a long process. Obviously it's really quick in this video because it's a time lapse, but it's definitely a very long process of making a bezel. There's a lot of different steps, and you do have to go in a specific order so that you make it correctly. here I'm about to do the grinding and filing, which takes a super long time, and the silver or gold, they both get really hot, so you kind of have to take your hands off every once in a while, otherwise it can really hurt your fingers. That's sanding, and then this is attaching, making it into like a full ring, and attaching easy solder, and then I think soon you're gonna see Julie in the background because I'd never done this before, so she was kind of instructing me how to get it to stay on and be in the right place. And then one of the last steps is putting in your actual gemstone and filing and bezeling, and depending on your gemstone, some of them have like different levels of hardness, and so this was an opal, which can break super easily, so you do have to be pretty careful in order not to break your gemstone. And that is how I created one of my rings. So now that you know how I actually create my pieces, this was my first project that I made with Julie during, I think, our second meeting together. She taught me like every single step that I needed to know of creating a bezel, and then she kind of set me loose, and she would create her bezels and like had me do my own stuff, and I was able to ask questions, but she wouldn't do anything for me or like help me along or anything like that, which was really beneficial for me. This piece took me, I want to say like 4.5 hours, which seems crazy, but we did a lot of talking, so maybe not that long. But it's definitely a super intense process. And so when I finished it, Julie and I were talking, and she was like, "Oh, are you super excited that you finished your first piece?" And I was obviously psyched, but it also has some imperfections, which I'll talk about. And then she said this quote to me, and she said, "I don't even know where the first piece of jewelry I made is. I think I threw it away." And I kind of laughed it off in the moment, but looking back, it was a really important quote because this piece itself is very imperfect. I actually chipped my gemstone, and the bezel doesn't perfectly encase it. And then also the jump ring, which is the little loop that you put the chain through, isn't on straight. I have a piece of Julie's to kind of compare. You can really see the difference in my level of expertise. So this quote meant a lot to me because it made me realize how unrealistic I was being about creating my pieces of jewelry. You know, I was going along in the process and thinking it might end up looking something like hers, which obviously it does not at all. And so I really loved that quote from her, and it also made me realize that she started out, you know, probably making pieces maybe not as bad as I did, but probably somewhere around there, and that you can still get to that point with a lot of practice. So these are a few of my finished pieces, a few of my favorites. I also have my little display over there. 2 of them I like repurposed and like with stuff I already had, and then the rest of them, the 2 bracelets on there, and then the rest I made with Julie. These are just several of my favorites. And then back to my essential question, what will I discover about myself through learning a new and challenging skill like jewelry making? I learned a lot about myself through the process, not everything, like as I was working with Julie. Some things I did learn as I was working with her, but a lot like reflecting back, and I realized that I learned a lot. The first thing is that my patience is pretty minimal but growing. It's definitely a very long and intense process, and I kind of like things to be done like immediately, and I just want to get like the final product. So it's definitely a lot of learning to like really go through step by step and be patient and understand that I won't finish things right away. So my patience did grow over the time of my over the span of my project, not significantly, but like a little bit. The next one, learning new skills, is definitely challenging and frustrating. I hadn't really learned something like hands-on in a while, so it definitely like tested me, and it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. The next one, which is optimism is always beneficial. Obviously, most people know that, and I knew that too, but I didn't really like apply it that much. And so whenever I was working and I'd say like, "Oh, I can't do this," or "This is taking too long," Julie would always correct me, luckily, and let me know that that wasn't helpful to me or to anyone else. So I definitely learned that when I was more positive and really believed that I could do specific parts, that it was helpful for me and others. The next one I touched on, but having realistic expectations is really important. You can't expect to make things perfect the first time. I don't know why I was thinking that, but I was. The next one, perfecting a skill takes time, often years. You know, Julie's been doing this for 12 years, and she makes incredible pieces, but I can't expect to make those on my first try or even in the span of time that I worked with her. And the last one, which was like the best learning, I guess, for me, was that I actually love making jewelry. It's really hard, and it definitely tests you, but being able to make something yourself and being able to like wear that and know that like this was all your hard work is really, really cool, I think. So my next steps, I'm actually working at Lisa Hall Studio this summer. I'm going to help Lisa Hall and Julie as well to create their bezels, which will really allow me to develop my skills. So I'm really excited about that. And then I can also continue making pieces in my own free time, which hopefully I will have some free time this summer. And then lastly, thanks to Julie Havener, my incredible mentor. She was really the best and we had a lot of fun. Thanks to Lisa Hall, who graciously let us work in her studio and who also offered me a job this summer, which is pretty cool. Miss Dillon, who's my senior advisor, she really was on my case if I wasn't turning in stuff on time, and she wanted to make sure that this was totally done. My parents, who have listened to this presentation more times than they would like to, and then you all for listening to my presentation. And then this is my works cited, which is annotated in my little packet.
The slide that you had, some of the example of the work, the bottom right hand for earrings, are those the ones you're wearing right now?
I think they are. Yeah, those are the ones I'm wearing right now. Yeah.
I thought I recognized those.
Yeah.
Very nice.
These are one of my favorite pieces, definitely.
Is druzy a type of gemstone, or is I've never heard of that before? It's very cool.
Yeah, it comes in a lot of different. That pendant that I made, it was also druzy, so it comes in a lot of different colors, which I think is really fun. It's one of my favorites for sure. Yeah.
You had a slide that you did before the tools that showed like...
Kind of like step by step, was it the process slide?
Yes,
okay.
before the tools. Could you explain that a little bit more? I mean, I know you talked about the process afterwards.
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
So the first image is just the gemstones alone, and then the one below that is when you have the bezel wire around your gemstone. And doing like all the soldering, you don't actually have your gemstone inside because they can't really handle heat. So you make like the entire bezel and then you put it inside. And then you see the silver sheet underneath that. And then the one below that is the bezel wire attached to the silver sheet. And then you can see the edges are cut off, which obviously you don't want those edges on. And then the one below is like unsanded and ungrinded versus grinded and sanded, and then the attaching of posts. And then after, I've used a bezel rocker and a file in order to encase the gemstone. So it doesn't do like every single step. I don't really have a piece where I went through every single step taking an image, but that just gives like a little background, I guess.
Do you find that now when you see jewelry, you're looking at it with a very different eye? Like, are you noticing things that you never would have noticed before?
Yeah, definitely. You notice a lot more things. And with like your own pieces, you definitely become like a lot more of a perfect, because I obviously want them to look like as great as Julie's do. So you definitely become like much more of a perfectionist, I would say.
Yeah.
So the flux and the solder part, the flux, that protects?
The flux is kind of like glue for the solder, so you melt the flux with a torch and it gets liquidy. It kind of flows a little bit, and then you can attach the solder more easily so it'll stick to the place that you're trying to solder. And then you melt the solder with a torch, and as soon as it flows, you take the heat off and then throw it into the pickle.
I wondered if was there some part of this whole process, say, that you found more difficult than another? For example, the
soldering, was definitely something I hadn't done before, so that was a little tricky. And then actually, surprisingly, attaching a jump ring, which is that tiny little loop that you put the chain through, was very hard for me. I didn't expect it to be. I have no idea why it was, but my first piece was a pendant, and putting on that jump ring was like very, very hard. I tried probably like 6 or 7 times. It was
Is there
definitely
another
frustrating.
avenue of jewelry that you want to explore now as a result of, I mean, you've mastered some of the, you know what's
Yeah.
involved with making bezels. Is there some other
I do
avenue that you got exposed to?
really like the look of bezels, so I think I'll probably continue to do bezel work, but definitely now that I'm working there and I can make pieces on my own time, I think I might explore like with different designs and maybe different gemstones, because I can actually like order my own and create my own pieces this summer, which I think will be cool.
You mentioned a little bit about design, and I heard you say at the beginning you were taking photographs or keeping a notebook. I was curious about how you come up with your designs, or you talked about artists that make jewelry and they have specific things that you can recognize their work. So how do you come up with your designs? Do you draw something out? Do you think of it in your head, or how do you get there?
For me, I did like, Julie does bezels, so obviously it was easiest to learn like what exactly she knows how to do. So basically I just like pick a gemstone and then decide whether I'd want it to be like a pendant or an earring. So it wasn't like that much of a design process, but I'm hoping this summer that I can really like figure out what type of pieces I want to design and get more into like creating some of the pieces that I've seen, I guess.
And I heard you say too that I'm like this too. I want to see things get done. And,
Yeah.
As this, I think you said that it's given you another way to kind of step back and develop more patience.
Yeah, it's definitely like a long process. So I wouldn't say like I'm a changed person and now I'm like patient, but definitely like I've become a little bit more patient throughout this process. Maybe not in my whole life, but like definitely with making pieces. Yeah. Haven't changed that much. Yeah.
So I know this might be a little bit early to ask you this question, but you talked about how jewelers have different styles.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea what your style might be? Like, are you contemporary? Are you natural? I mean, what type of style?
I guess I haven't really thought about that much. I kind of just wanted to create pieces that look similar to Julie's because I really love what it looks like, but obviously like if I wanted to open up my own space I'd have to develop my own style, but I guess that wasn't something that I totally thought about. I kind of just wanted to learn how to make specific pieces. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just like haven't totally thought about my style, I guess. Any other questions?
Can I add a comment?
Yeah.
So Sammy, besides being an awesome person all around, in the studio, she's left-handed. It's a right.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that. Yeah, so that was also.
Intense. I was not
Yeah.
prepared for that. Some of the tools don't translate, and she translated them. So I would.
That's
Yeah,
why she's
probably
a type
something
A.
I should. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, if you guys want to step out, we will